She thought the storm would be the biggest challenge of the night, until she heard the faint cries outside her cabin. What she found in the snow would change her life forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Winter in the Texas Panhandle of 1875 was particularly unforgiving. Martha Wilson stood at the window of her modest cabin, watching as the blizzard intensified, transforming the landscape into an endless sea of white. At 32, Martha had weathered many storms since moving west after losing her husband in the Civil War. But something about this one sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "We should have brought in more firewood yesterday," she muttered to herself, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The cabin, situated on the edge of the settlement of Willow Creek, stood as a testament to her determination. She had built this life from nothing after James died, learning to survive on her own. Martha stoked the fire and checked her supplies. With enough food to last a week, she felt prepared, yet uneasy. The wind howled, rattling the shutters she had secured earlier that morning. Snow accumulated rapidly against the door, and she knew by morning she might have to dig her way out. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped further. Martha added another log to the fire, contemplating the long night ahead when a sound cut through the howling wind. She froze, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. There it was again, a faint cry, almost like a child. "Impossible," she whispered, but moved to the window nonetheless. Peering through the frost-covered glass, she saw nothing but swirling snow and darkness. The cry came again, more distinct this time. Martha's heart raced. Someone was out there in the killing cold. Without hesitation, she grabbed her heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around her face, and lit a lantern. "Lord help whoever's out there," she prayed, bracing herself before opening the door. The wind nearly knocked her backwards, snow immediately blasting into the cabin. Martha held the lantern high, its light barely penetrating the whiteout conditions. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Is anyone there?" She took a tentative step outside, then another. The snow was knee-deep already, and the bitter cold stung her exposed skin. Just as she was about to turn back, convinced she had imagined the sound, the lantern light caught something moving. There, huddled against a fallen log not 20 yards from her cabin, were two small figures. Martha pushed forward, fighting against the wind. "Oh my God!" she gasped as she drew closer. Two children, a boy and a girl, clung to each other, partially covered in snow. Their dark hair and clothing marked them as Native American, Comanche, she guessed, from the nearby territory. The boy, who appeared to be around 8, looked up at her with fearful but defiant eyes. He had positioned himself protectively in front of the smaller girl, who couldn't have been more than 5. Both were severely underdressed for the blizzard, wearing only light buckskin clothing. "It's all right," Martha said gently, though she knew they likely didn't understand English. She gestured toward her cabin. "Come warm." The boy hesitated, clearly distrustful, but a violent shiver from his sister seemed to make the decision for him. He nodded once, struggling to stand while supporting the little girl. Martha didn't hesitate. She handed the boy the lantern and scooped up the girl, who felt frighteningly cold in her arms. "Follow me," she said, pointing toward the cabin's glowing windows. "Quickly now." The journey back to the cabin, though short, was treacherous. The boy stumbled several times, but kept pace, his determination evident in every labored step. When they finally crossed the threshold, Martha kicked the door shut behind them, setting the little girl down gently by the fire. "We need to get you both warm right away," she said, moving efficiently around the cabin. She grabbed blankets, unwrapped the children from their frozen outer clothes, and wrapped them in warm wool. The little girl's lips were blue, her small hands nearly white with cold. The boy watched Martha warily as she worked, never taking his eyes off his sister. When Martha brought a cup of warm broth to the girl's lips, he reached out suddenly, stopping her hand. "It's just broth," Martha explained, taking a sip herself to demonstrate. "See? It will help." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and he released her wrist, nodding for her to continue. The little girl sipped tentatively at first, then more eagerly as the warmth spread through her body. "What in heaven's name were you doing out there?" Martha asked, though she knew they couldn't answer. "Where are your parents?" The boy pointed eastward, then made a motion like riding a horse. "Your people are that way?" "On horseback." Martha tried to understand. The boy nodded, then held up 5 fingers. 5 days? Martha guessed. The boy shook his head, closed his hand, then opened it again, showing all 5 fingers. 5 people? This time he nodded. Martha sighed, looking at the raging storm outside. "Well, no one's going anywhere tonight. You're safe here until the storm passes." As the night wore on, the children gradually relaxed. The little girl fell asleep wrapped in blankets before the fire, while the boy fought to keep his eyes open, clearly determined to stand guard. Martha prepared a simple pallet for them near the hearth, the warmest spot in the cabin. "Rest," she told the boy, miming sleep. "I'll keep watch." Reluctantly, he lay down beside his sister, one hand protectively on her shoulder. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed him as well. Martha watched the sleeping children, wondering about their story. How had they become separated from their people? What would happen when the storm cleared? The Comanche were known for their fierce protection of their own, especially their children. Somewhere out there, someone must be desperately searching for these two. As the blizzard raged outside, Martha settled into her rocking chair, rifle across her lap, not for the children, but for whatever might come looking for them when the storm broke. Whether it was soldiers, settlers with grudges against natives, or desperate Comanche warriors tracking their lost ones, Martha knew that sheltering these children might have consequences. But looking at their peaceful faces in sleep, she knew she'd make the same choice again. "We'll figure it all out tomorrow," she whispered to herself. As the wind continued to howl through the longest night of winter. 3 days passed before the blizzard finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a transformed world of pristine white drifts taller than a man. Martha had spent the time caring for the children, who she'd come to call Little Fox for the boy and Sparrow for the girl, names that seemed to fit their personalities. He watchful and clever, she small and quick. Communication improved with each passing hour. Martha taught them simple English words, water, bread, sleep, while they offered Comanche words in return. She learned their real names were something like Quana for the boy and Eneng for the girl, though she struggled with the pronunciation. By the morning of the 4th day, Martha knew decisions had to be made. The settlement of Willow Creek lay 5 miles to the west, where she could seek help, but relations between settlers and the Comanche remained tense despite recent treaties. Taking native children into town could invite dangerous misunderstandings. "We need to figure out how to get you home," Martha said over breakfast, using gestures to supplement her words. Quana pointed eastward again, then at the snow outside, his expression doubtful. "I know," Martha sighed. "The snow's too deep for you to walk, and I don't have horses." The little girl, Anananki, suddenly perked up, pointing excitedly out the window. Martha followed her gaze but saw nothing except the endless white landscape. "What is it, Sparrow?" she asked. The child ran to the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. Martha joined her, straining to see what had caught her attention. Then she saw it, a dark shape moving against the snow, then another, and another. "Riders," Martha whispered, her heart beginning to race. She counted 5 figures on horseback, moving steadily toward her cabin. Quana had joined them at the window, his eyes wide. He let out a cry of recognition and spoke rapidly to his sister in their language. The little girl clapped her hands with delight. "Is that your father?" Martha asked, pointing to the approaching riders. The boy nodded vigorously, a smile breaking across his face for the first time since she'd found them. Martha felt simultaneous relief and apprehension. While she was glad the children would be reunited with their people, she knew the approaching warriors might see her as an enemy. Stories of Comanche raids were common, as were tales of the harsh retribution dealt by settlers and soldiers. "All right then," she said with forced cheerfulness. Let's get you ready to meet them." She helped the children don their now dried clothing, making sure they were warmly wrapped in additional blankets she could spare. As the riders drew closer, Martha took a deep breath and opened her cabin door. The Comanche warriors halted their horses about 50 yards from her cabin, forming a line. 4 remained mounted while one, clearly the leader, dismounted and approached on foot. He was tall and powerfully built, with a face weathered by sun and wind. Unlike the others who wore traditional clothing, this man wore a curious mixture of native and white attire, buckskins, paired with a cavalry coat that had seen better days. Martha felt a moment of terror as he approached, his expression unreadable, his hand resting casually on a knife at his belt. But then Quanah burst past her, running through the snow toward the man, calling out excitedly. The warrior's stern expression immediately transformed as he knelt to embrace the boy. Anank followed her brother, wading awkwardly through the deep snow until the man caught her up in his arms as well. The reunion moved Martha deeply. She remained in her doorway, giving them space while remaining visible. After several minutes, the warrior set the children down and spoke to them seriously, gesturing toward Martha. Both children spoke rapidly, pointing to the cabin and then to the surrounding snowfield where she had found them. The warrior looked up at Martha, studying her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he approached alone, leaving the children standing in the snow. As he drew near, Martha straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. "They were lost in the storm," she said, knowing he might not understand her words, but hoping her tone conveyed her meaning. "I found them nearly frozen to death." The man stopped a respectful distance from her porch. "My children tell me you saved them," he said in perfect, albeit accented English. Martha couldn't hide her surprise. "You speak English?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I speak many languages. It is necessary." "Your children were very brave," Martha offered. "Especially the boy. He protected his sister." Pride flashed in the warrior's eyes. "He is learning to be a man." He hesitated, then inclined his head slightly. "I am Lone Wolf. My son and daughter wandered from our camp before the storm. We have been searching since the snow stopped enough to ride." "I'm Martha Wilson," she replied. "I'm glad you found them. They've been anxious to return to you." Lone Wolf studied her cabin, then the surrounding area. "You live here alone?" "I do. My husband died in the war." He nodded as if this explained something important. "A woman alone in this country must be strong." "We do what we must," Martha replied simply. "Yes," he agreed, "we do." He gestured to his waiting warriors. "My people have little love for whites." "Many would have left white children to the storm." Martha met his gaze steadily. "And not many people, just me." Something like respect flickered in Lone Wolf's eyes. He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a small object, holding it out to her. It was a beautifully crafted pendant, a turquoise stone wrapped in intricate silver wire. "For the life of my children," he said. "A debt that cannot be fully repaid." Martha hesitated before accepting the gift. "There is no debt. Anyone would have done the same." Lone Wolf's expression turned grim. "No, not anyone." He gestured to the pendant. "This marks you as friend to my family. If you ever need help, show this to any Comanche. Say the name Lone Wolf." Martha closed her fingers around the pendant, understanding the significance of the gesture. "Thank you." He nodded once, then turned to call his children. They came running, stopping to look back at Martha with bright eyes. "Say thank you to the kind lady," Lone Wolf instructed them in English. "Thank you," they chorused, their pronunciation careful and practiced. Martha smiled at them. "You're welcome, little fox. You too, Sparrow." Quanah grinned at the nickname, while his sister giggled. "I have given them food for their journey," Martha told Lone Wolf, "and these blankets will keep them warm." The Comanche leader studied her thoughtfully. "The winter is harsh. You need these things." "I have enough," she assured him, though in truth, the extra blankets would be missed. Lone Wolf seemed to read the truth in her eyes. "I will return," he said abruptly, "when the snow melts. I will bring you supplies to replace what you have given." Before Martha could protest, he led the children back to where the other warriors waited. With practiced efficiency, they lifted the children onto horses. Lone Wolf mounted his own horse, settling his daughter before him. He raised a hand in farewell to Martha, a gesture she returned. Then, without further ceremony, the Comanche turned their horses and rode eastward, quickly becoming smaller against the vast white landscape. Martha stood in her doorway long after they had disappeared from view, the turquoise pendant warm in her palm. The encounter had left her with a curious feeling, as if something important had shifted in her world. She had acted out of simple human kindness, expecting nothing in return, yet had somehow formed a connection that transcended the bitter hostilities between their peoples. As she finally closed her door against the cold, Martha wondered if she would ever see Lone Wolf or the children again. The frontier was vast, and promises were often swept away like tracks in the snow. Still, she carefully secured the pendant around her neck, tucking it beneath her collar where it rested against her skin, a reminder that even in this harsh land, humanity could sometimes bridge the deepest divides. Spring came late to the Texas Panhandle that year. Martha had nearly forgotten about her winter visitors as she focused on surviving the remaining harsh months and preparing her small garden plot for planting. The pendant Lone Wolf had given her remained around her neck, more out of habit than expectation. April brought warming winds and the first green shoots pushing through the soil. Martha was on her knees in her garden, coaxing tender bean plants into the earth, when she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, to see a small party approaching from the east. Her heart quickened as she recognized the lead rider. Lone Wolf sat tall on his horse, flanked by 3 other warriors. Behind them came 2 pack horses laden with bundles. There was no sign of the children. Martha quickly stood, brushing soil from her hands and skirt. She hadn't truly expected him to return, yet here he was, making good on his promise. She walked to meet the riders, stopping a respectful distance away. Lone Wolf raised his hand in greeting as he approached, then dismounted with fluid grace. The other warriors remained on horseback, their expressions watchful but not hostile. "You have returned," Martha said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "I said I would," Lone Wolf replied simply, as if keeping promises was the most natural thing in the world. His eyes moved to her garden. "You grow food." Martha nodded. "It's not much, but it helps see me through the winter." He studied her small homestead with an appraising eye. A woman should not work the land alone. "Perhaps not," Martha acknowledged, "but here I am all the same." This drew a slight smile from the warrior. "Yes, here you are." He gestured to the pack horses. "I have brought what I promised. Food, blankets, dried meat that will keep through next winter." Martha was momentarily overwhelmed by the generosity of the offering. "This is far more than what I gave. The blankets I shared were old and patched. The lives of my children cannot be measured in blankets, old or new," Lone Wolf replied. He hesitated, then added, "Quanah and Mank ask about you. They wish to come, but the journey is long." The mention of the children warmed Martha's heart. "How are they?" "They grow strong," he said with evident pride. "And Mank tells all who will listen about the white woman who saved them from the snow spirits." Martha laughed softly. "And what does Quanah say?" "Less," Lone Wolf admitted with a hint of amusement. "But he works on his English words every day. He says he will speak as well as his father someday." "You speak remarkably well," Martha observed. "May I ask how you learned?" A shadow crossed Lone Wolf's face. "I spent 2 winters at the white man's school when I was young, before I escaped and returned to my people." Martha sensed the pain behind those words and didn't press further. Instead, she gestured toward her cabin. "Would you and your men care for some coffee before you continue your journey?" Lone Wolf appeared surprised by the invitation. He glanced back at his companions, who watched the exchange with interest. "My men will wait," he decided. "I would accept your coffee." Martha nodded and led the way to her cabin. She was acutely aware of how humble her home must appear to the Comanche leader. A single room with simple furnishings she had either made herself or traded for with neighbors. "Please sit," she offered. gesturing to one of the two chairs at her small table while she busied herself with the coffee pot on her cast-iron stove. Lone Wolf lowered himself onto the chair, looking almost comically large in the modest furniture. His eyes roamed the cabin, taking in every detail. "You built this place?" he asked. "My husband started it," Martha explained, measuring coffee grounds. "I finished it after he didn't come home from the war." "This war between white men," Lone Wolf commented. "It brought changes for my people too." Martha nodded, understanding the understatement in his words. The chaos of the Civil War had altered the balance of power on the frontier, intensifying conflicts between settlers and native tribes. "Your husband fought for which side?" Lone Wolf asked. "The North," Martha replied. "Though out here, it didn't much matter. Neighbors fought neighbors. Brothers fought brothers. Like my people now," Lone Wolf said quietly. "Some choose to go to the reservations. Others fight. Families are divided." Martha brought 2 steaming cups to the table, sitting across from him. "And which path have you chosen?" Lone Wolf wrapped his hands around the cup, studying the dark liquid. "I walk between worlds," he said finally. "I fight when I must. I negotiate when I can. For my children, I seek a future." "That's all any parent wants," Martha offered. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "You have no children?" Martha shook her head, an old pain resurfacing. "It wasn't meant to be." They drank their coffee in companionable silence for a few moments. Martha found herself studying her visitor more closely. Despite his imposing presence, there was an intelligence and thoughtfulness in his eyes that belied the savage stereotype many settlers held of the Comanche. "The settlement to the west," Lone Wolf said suddenly. "Willow Creek. Do they treat you well?" The question surprised Martha. "Well enough. I trade there sometimes. Keep mostly to myself." "They know you live alone?" Martha nodded, beginning to understand his concern. "I've had no trouble, if that's what you're asking." Lone Wolf set down his empty cup. "Times grow more difficult. The buffalo grows scarce. Hungry men, white or Comanche, can become dangerous." "I can take care of myself," Martha assured him, though his words stirred a quiet anxiety she usually kept at bay. The isolation that had once been her refuge sometimes felt increasingly precarious. "I believe you can," he said, a hint of respect in his voice. He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a small object, setting it on the table between them. It was a beautifully carved whistle made from bone, decorated with intricate symbols. "If danger comes," he explained, "use this. The sound carries far. My people hunt in these lands through summer. They will hear and come." Martha stared at the whistle, momentarily speechless at the unexpected offer of protection. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. "Your people have little reason to help someone like me." Lone Wolf's expression grew serious. "When the blizzard came, you did not see Comanche children. You saw children. I do not see a white woman. I see a woman of courage who saved my family." He pushed the whistle toward her. "Some bonds cross the divisions of our peoples." Martha carefully picked up the whistle, feeling its smooth surface against her fingertips. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing no other words could adequately express her gratitude. Lone Wolf rose from the table, his impressive height causing him to duck slightly beneath the low ceiling beams. "I must return to my men." Martha walked with him to the door. Outside, the warriors remained mounted, though they had allowed their horses to graze while they waited. 2 of them were unloading the supplies from the pack horses, creating neat stacks beside Martha's cabin. "This is too much," Martha protested. "It is what I choose to give," Lone Wolf replied with finality. "My debt remains." He rejoined his men, mounting his horse with practiced ease. As the party prepared to depart, Lone Wolf turned back to Martha. "When summer reaches its height, I will bring my children to visit," he said. "Nick wishes to see the woman from her stories." Martha smiled broadly at this unexpected promise. "I would like that very much." With a final nod, Lone Wolf led his warriors eastward. Martha watched until they disappeared from view, the bone whistle clutched in her hand and a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. The frontier had always been a place of sharp divisions, settler against native, civilization against wilderness. Yet here she stood, a widow alone on the prairie, somehow bridging one of those seemingly insurmountable divides. As she turned to examine the generous bounty left beside her cabin, Martha felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of connection, of being part of something beyond her solitary existence. Whether born of gratitude or something deeper, Lone Wolf had extended his protection to her, creating a bond that defied the bitter hostilities of their worlds. Martha carefully hung the bone whistle beside her door, hoping she would never need to use it, but drawing comfort from its presence nonetheless. Then she set to work storing the unexpected gifts, her thoughts drifting to summer and the promised visit from the children she had rescued from the snow. The Texas summer blazed across the prairie, turning the landscape golden under a relentless sun. Martha had spent the long days tending her garden, preserving food for the coming winter, and watching the eastern horizon. June had passed, then July, with no sign of Lone Wolf or his children. She told herself not to be disappointed. Promises on the frontier were subject to the harsh realities of survival, and the Comanche had their own struggles. August brought rumors to Willow Creek of increased tensions between settlers and natives. Martha made her monthly trip to town for supplies she couldn't produce herself, listening carefully to the talk at the general store. Army's been pushing hard against the holdouts, Henry Miller, the storekeeper, told her as he measured out sugar. Most of the Comanche bands have gone to the reservation now, they say. Martha kept her expression neutral, though her heart sank at the news. All of them? Near enough, Henry replied. Couple of stubborn chiefs still raiding, but word is they can't hold out much longer. Buffalo's gone, and they can't feed their people. He wrapped her sugar in paper. It's for the best, Mrs. Wilson. They'll learn civilized ways on the reservation. Martha said nothing, paying for her goods and declining Henry's offer to escort her home. As she guided her small wagon back to her cabin, she wondered about Lone Wolf and his band. Had they surrendered to the inevitable? Were the children now confined to the dreary confines of a reservation? The thought troubled her deeply. 3 days later, as the afternoon heat began to wane, Martha looked up from her washing to see dust on the eastern horizon. She shaded her eyes, heart quickening as she made out riders approaching, fewer than before, moving at a steady pace. As they drew closer, she recognized Lone Wolf leading this small party. Behind him rode Quanah, sitting tall and proud on his own pony, and behind the boy came another rider carrying Manka. Only one other warrior accompanied them, making a party of just 4 riders, far fewer than before. Martha set aside her washing and walked out to meet them, unable to contain her smile as the children spotted her and waved enthusiastically. Lone Wolf halted the group a respectful distance from the cabin. This time, all of them dismounted, including the children who ran ahead to Martha while the adults followed more sedately. "Miss Martha," Nangan called out in careful English, flinging herself at the woman with unrestrained joy. Martha knelt to embrace the little girl, marveling at how much she had grown in the months since their first meeting. "Hello, Sparrow," she said, using the nickname that made the child giggle with delight. Quanah approached more cautiously, but with a shy smile. "Hello," he said proudly in English. "We come ... to visit." "So you have," Martha replied warmly, standing to greet Lone Wolf and the other warrior. "Welcome. I wasn't sure you would come." "I said I would," Lone Wolf reminded her, though his expression was more grave than she remembered. "Though our visit must be brief." Martha nodded her understanding, gesturing toward her cabin. "Please come inside out of the sun. I have cool water and food to share." The children needed no further invitation, dashing toward the cabin with excited chatter. The warriors followed more slowly, the unnamed companion scanning the surroundings with watchful eyes. Inside, Martha served a simple meal of cornbread, dried fruit, and the last of her spring preserves. The children ate heartily, while Lone Wolf and his companion took smaller portions, seemingly more focused on the conversation than the food. "You have heard of the changes coming to my people?" Lone Wolf asked after the children had gone outside to explore Martha's garden under the watchful eye of the other warrior. Martha nodded solemnly. There's talk in town. I wasn't sure how much was true. Much is true, he acknowledged grimly. The people are being forced to the reservation at Fort Sill. Many have already gone. Others. He trailed off, looking toward the children outside. And you? Martha asked quietly. Lone Wolf's expression hardened. I have resisted. My band is one of the few still free. But each moon brings fewer options. The buffalo are nearly gone. The army pushes closer. Martha felt a profound sadness at his words. What will you do? What I must for my children, he replied simply. Soon, perhaps, we too will go to the reservation, but not yet. Not while we can still live as the people have always lived. The weight of history hung heavy in the small cabin, the inevitable closing of a way of life that had existed for centuries before European boots had touched American soil. The children look well, Martha offered, trying to lighten the mood. Quanah has grown so tall. A flicker of pride crossed Lone Wolf's face. He is strong. His English improves each day. And Nenangch is as bright as sunshine, Martha added with a smile. She speaks of you often, Lone Wolf said. The story of the snowstorm has become her favorite tale. She calls you Spirit Woman who walks through blizzards. Martha laughed softly. Hardly a spirit. Just lucky I heard them that night. Not luck, Lone Wolf said firmly. The Great Spirit guided you. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the sounds of the children's laughter drifting in from outside. Martha found herself studying Lone Wolf's face, noting new lines of worry that hadn't been there before. Is there anything I can do? She asked suddenly. Lone Wolf looked at her with surprise. You have done much already. Not enough, Martha replied. Your children deserve a future where they can be free and happy. That future grows dim, he admitted. The old ways are ending. My son and daughter will live in a different world than I have known. Perhaps, Martha acknowledged, but they have a father who loves them enough to face that world, whatever it brings. Lone Wolf's expression softened slightly. You understand more than most of your people. Before Martha could respond, the door burst open as Neneng ran in, clutching wildflowers she had picked from around the garden. She thrust them proudly toward Martha. For you, she announced. Pretty like you. Martha accepted the slightly crushed bouquet with genuine pleasure. Thank you, Sparrow. They're beautiful. Quanah followed his sister, looking slightly embarrassed by her exuberance, but pleased by Martha's reaction. We must go soon, he said in careful English. Long ride before dark. Lone Wolf nodded, rising from the table. My son is right. We cannot linger. Martha felt disappointment sweep through her, though she understood the necessity. Will I see you again? She asked, immediately regretting the vulnerability in her voice. Lone Wolf's eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the unlikely bond that had formed across the divide of their worlds. The future is hidden from us, he said finally. But I believe our paths will cross again, Martha Wilson. Martha nodded, accepting this answer as the most honest he could give. She gathered a bundle of food for their journey, bread, dried meat, and fruit, pressing it into Lone Wolf's hands despite his initial reluctance. For the children, she insisted, please. He accepted with quiet dignity. You have a generous heart. Outside, as they prepared to mount their horses, Neneng clung to Martha's skirts, suddenly reluctant to leave. Come with us, she pleaded in her limited English. Martha knelt beside the child, her heart twisting. Oh, Sparrow, I can't. This is my home, just as your father's camp is yours. You alone, the little girl persisted. Sad, not sad, Martha corrected gently. Just different paths. But knowing you and your brother has brought me great joy. Quanah approached, placing a hand on his sister's shoulder. We will remember, he promised solemnly. Martha stood, blinking back unexpected tears as Lone Wolf lifted the children onto their horses. The other warrior was already mounted, scanning the horizon with vigilant eyes. The whistle, Lone Wolf reminded her. pointing to the bone carving that now hung beside her door. "If trouble comes." "I remember," Martha assured him. "But I pray I'll never need it." Lone Wolf mounted his horse with characteristic grace, then looked down at Martha one final time. "You are Pia Mapitsi now, good woman, to my people. The friend who walks through snow to save Comanche children." Martha felt the weight of the name, understanding it as the gift it was intended to be. "Thank you," she said simply. "Safe journey." With a final nod, Lone Wolf turned his horse eastward. The children waved enthusiastically as the small party rode away, their figures gradually diminishing against the vastness of the prairie. Martha watched until they disappeared from view, the pendant warm against her skin and the bone whistle a reassuring presence beside her door. Whatever the future held for Lone Wolf and his children, whether reservation life or continued resistance, she had become part of their story, just as they had become part of hers. As the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, Martha returned to her cabin, no longer feeling quite so alone on the frontier. The vast distance between their worlds remained, yet somehow they had found common ground in the simple currency of human kindness and mutual respect. She placed Nameng's wildflowers in a jar of water on her table, a colorful reminder that even in this harsh land of divisions and conflict, unexpected connections could bloom, as fragile and precious as flowers pushing through the snow after the longest winter.